dear participants of this week's part of UCAN University Lifelong Learning Open Fora. We have this week dedicated to bridging active citizenship and university lifelong learning. I think it is somehow very much important not just to have a close approach to the topic of active citizenship, global citizenship, and educational and learning perspectives, but also to have a look what higher education may do and may respond to some current issues reflected by societal groups, stakeholders, and so on. And I think today it's a lovely day to greet Maja MAKSIMOVIC and Katarina POPOVIC from Belgrade. And I think the topic that you together offered is something very much interesting and challenging, to put university lifelong learning into the context of how higher education institutions can actively and critically respond to societal changes. So very welcome, and I would like to give the floor to Maja to start with the presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Balázs, for this warm welcome. And I'm very happy to be here among colleagues, and I see familiar names and faces. Of course, I'm sorry we are not together in Budapest in May, but nevertheless, I'm very enthusiastic to share how we work at the Faculty of Philosophy at the Department for Pedagogy and Andragogy.
Just a remark, Maja. I think everybody would like to stay in a lovely place to be together face to face, but I think this is challenging times, and I really do welcome all the participants who have arrived to this today's presentation. Very welcome on this platform. So I give back the floor to you, Maja.
Thank you. Just to open the presentation. Let me. Just a moment. Okay, so Katarina and I will talk about how higher education institution, particularly Faculty of Philosophy, we will give an example of what we are doing at the faculty, how basically we can support student and community engagement in civic education. So my role will be to talk about particular subject that we are teaching at the department, and it is an optional subject: adult education, activism, and human rights. We started teaching this subject. I think it's already 6 or 7 years ago, and we were really faced with a question: how do we teach activism? Is it actually possible to teach that? And how can we create learning methodology that will support students to actively participate in their environments, to influence power structure, and to create an educational intervention? That's what we call it, to create an educational response to struggles, as you, Balázs, said, as you already share, how basically through education we can support other social structures, movements, and struggles. We wanted to really to try to support students' agency, and to really try to work in their micro environments, to recognize issues in their community and to address these issues. Just to start with common definition of education for democratic citizenship, Council of Europe 2010, where focus is actually on developing knowledge and skills and understanding to empower them and to exercise and defend democratic rights. So Katarina and I really question this idea as education for democratic citizenship as preparation for engagement in for participation. Learning is seen as preparation for democratic life, and emancipation is a kind of external intervention. So we try to think, how can we actually begin with the principle of equality? So we didn't see this subject, we didn't see this, we didn't want to teach students how to be prepared for participation of democratic life, but we see teaching as democratic process itself. So we have to start from equality and to create, emancipation is not the end itself, but together we create something new. So I will talk more about that. And here is an illustration of Jelena Jacimovic. We have the opportunity to be disobedient, meaning that we can really question the the usual epistemological assumption that from which we start teaching, but to try to question these norms and to create something together with students. So it is not about learning democracy as an individual, but we see really our classes as doing democracy as a collective. In order to do that, we rely on the concept of public pedagogy, and especially theory suggested by Gert Biesta, that public pedagogy is an educational process that focuses on the concrete practices of citizens when we engage corporally in social interactions. So it is not, we see this subject as creating social interactions which and simultaneously we learn and we do. So we map together with students, we try to map the ongoing questions, ongoing issues in relation to their community, particularly in relation to their role, to their identity as students, and to see how we can improve this situation. And this actually, this process has been very challenging because we do not have clear curriculum. If we had clear curriculum, then it would mean for me that we already exercise some kind of power and that we are in power positions as teacher if we set the clear outcomes for students and if we set the content. But it is really challenging because for me, I really questioned my role as a teacher. So what we realized is basically that we can only create to hold time and space and to start process, to begin something, to initiate, to create a kind of learning experience, and then student can engage with that and their topic will pop up. When their topic emerge, we try to see what is going on in Belgrade, what is going on in Serbia, what are current issues and questions, who are the organizations who are dealing with those questions, and to connect activist organization, NGOs, with students to talk and to so students can really see how it is done in the real world, but also to get some ideas what they can do. So it is a challenging for teacher because we are relying on the pedagogy of unknown. meaning that we do not really know what will happen in 2 or 3 weeks, but we build on the idea that is raised by the students. And sometimes students are really, they really want to have some kind of structure. They want to have a traditional way of teaching when they're very clear with the content and they're very clear with expectations. So sometimes it's a big challenge how to trust this process and how really to believe that it is useful and it is freeing both for teachers and for students. So far, already for 7 years, somehow we realized that I really trust this process, especially because of at the end of at the end of teaching, and the student write reflection, and then we can read their impressions, and we can see actually how certain activities really influence them. But what is our impression, what influenced the most is actually the kind of, how they say, kind of different way to engage within the higher education institution, and how the fact that they have opportunity to create curriculum, develop their agency to react, and but not only react, but to act in other areas of their life. So the premises we started with is that if we have to practice what we expect them to do. So if we every time we have to learn something new. And I cannot say that it is freedom per se, but we are trying really to practice freedom and to see where it will lead us. Again, we questioned the idea of individual exam because we wanted to create. The idea is to create something together. So if we talk about collective action, but then we have an individual exam, I believe it kills the idea. So we try to allow students, basically to choose collective action, to create collective action that will also be an exam for them, which they find actually very unusual, but then they start to work together. We also wanted to get out the classroom, because we see a city as the classroom. So we go around the city, we visit organization, we ask students to explore their community, to come with ideas, to go for some informative walks when they are asked to notice what is going on around them, to be sensitive to environment, to bring some objects, to talk with people. As we believe, as it is written here, that city is the best possible classroom for civic education. Again, while they're walking, they're putting adult educators' glasses, and they try to think whose knowledge dominantly forms our everyday city experience. Our big topic, due to certain tendencies going on in Belgrade, was the question of public space, which is definitely very much, which is a space where we practice our human rights, and which is very much related to the question of democracy. So it is important that we explore this public space and think about how classroom is a kind of public space, and what kind of public space will student create at a faculty? Is the faculty a kind of public space for them? Whose knowledge dominates this space, and how students can engage in transformation of this space. Again, we are always faced with this question, how to teach activism. And as I already shared we are always at the beginning. So we always start with question, and we never know how the semester will look like, but we are kind of naive and offering a space, creating a space for engagement with this beginner mind. Of course, we learn, and now after 7 years, it's easier when I see that students are not really satisfied because they do not have clear structure. It is easier now to face that, because I know what will come at the end. Now I will talk more about I will share with you specific examples, how student exams look like, or how the method, how ongoing classes, what we are doing now, especially in the situation of COVID, when we have to move to online environment, and it wasn't easy really to think about, to create activities. As for us, it is very important for activism in general. It is very important to work with body in space, so to occupy physical space. And I will share with you later how we're dealing with this now. But now I would like to start to share the context of Belgrade. And the really important question is the issue of public space, and how public space is somehow disappearing from the city. And like in many post-communist society, it is they're serving like military parade grounds. So it is a kind of, as you can see in this left, in the photo on your left, this is construction of Belgrade waterfront. So it is a kind of demonstration of power, and citizens do not really participate in decision-making about public space. There is one initiative, Do Not Drown Belgrade, and this initiative created protest again, this investitor in logic of using and transforming the city. So we, at the subject, during the teaching, we met this organization. We talked a lot about the question of public space. We talked a lot about the citizenship participation in decision making, and we asked students really to explore the faculty as public space. And so I would like now to read one student reflection, and to show you the photo of the hall as it was before their intervention. So you see, it looks like a kind of waiting room. And at the Faculty of Philosophy, we do not have, there is a library where students can learn, but we do not really have a space where they can gather together and learn together. So basically, again, the organization of the space emphasizes individual activities, and it is, they meet in cafes around the faculty, but the space does not support, does not create, does not send the message that group projects, group initiatives are part of learning. Classrooms are always locked. So basically they do not have, students do not have a place where they can be together. And this is one comment from our students. We ask ourselves, who created waiting space on the second floor of the Faculty of Philosophy in Belgrade? Who was distributed those chairs? And why there is nothing but them? For how long it has been like that? And does it have to be so? And this was the main question for activism. Does it have to be so? So they, by asking this question, they actually allow themselves to ask other questions, to ask similar questions about their environment. Does it have to be so? To start with that, and to start with question, then to continue with the idea, and then to allow this plurality of reaction to create a collective action. So to continue, why do students behave in accordance with the design of space and the design of the waiting idea? So this particular space creates status quo, waiting. There is nothing going on. So nothing important is going on in this hall. We just sit there and wait. Are we afraid to damage a frame that already exists, or we unconsciously live it? And I think this is the crucial, again, question for activism. Are we afraid really to react? Are we afraid to damage this frame? Are we afraid of control? And are we even ask this question? So they decided for their exam, to transform the space. Of course, before, they have to learn loads of things before they did it. They need to learn whom to talk to, how to organize themselves, how to work in team. What does it mean collective action? How to talk with people who is actually in charge of space at the faculty. And then they realize nobody really, because it is just like that, like it wasn't changed. But what was really important is for them to create a kind of ownership of their space. And how I will share again the student reflection, and I think this is really good illustration of the process. At one of the lectures, we got freedom. So first it's like giving freedom and having freedom, but they didn't really need to got freedom from us. But it's a bit strange. At one of the lectures, we got freedom to adjust the space that suits us, the freedom to move chairs, plants, and add whatever we want. After 10 minutes, it was no longer an empty space. Turn, rotate, move, add, and finally sit together with others. I will underline this: sit together with others, and the freedom to create what they want. There was a place where it was created. Is freedom the key word? Does anyone need to give us freedom in order to change something? So after these activities that we create together, students really ask this question that motivates them to act in a real world environment. And finally, they transform the second floor, and it is still like this. It is a challenge to keep it going, but we always have to give some impetus to students. But I think this is really good example on how they start asking questions and organizing themselves to change something. So in order to keep this, the space active, we continue working with the next generation, and we invite an illustrator. We work a lot with the artists from the community to write and to illustrate windows. So first, again, they were afraid, like, oh, are we allowed to do that at the faculty? why we are doing it. Are we allowed to create an intervention in this public space? But then they did it, and then they inform who they needed to inform, and people are really, they start to own this space, and just, they start to use it to organize themselves. Okay, so but what we are doing now in 2020, when we do not have this opportunity to create intervention at the faculty or other communities in Belgrade, so we somehow really tried to practice this idea that city is a classroom. And beside having online lectures, online discussions, actually, they do not really look like lectures. We engaged in walking as learning methodology, and it's walking is a kind of investigation of the city, and they learn by being in the world, but they do not only learn by analyzing it and assigning meaning to what they see and what they experience, but we really try to ask them to use their senses, to use touch, smell, to use their body, to see how they feel in certain spaces, to explore that, and then they created a kind of reflection. I will just show you, and then I will finish my part of presentation. So this is what we use, this whiteboards, and now we have many of them. So they put audio sounds, they put photos, notes about their walks. So this was basically the first meeting with them and the first task they have. But what emerged from this is the question of security of women in public space. So when we gave them this assignment, we didn't expect that this topic will emerge, but now we will continue to work on this issue, so how women feel in public space, and why we feel afraid, why we ask our friends to accompany us. So the next week we will meet with the organization who is dealing with these questions, and until then students will walk around Belgrade and make photos of places where they feel safe and places where they do not feel safe. So this is really important topic. I'm nervous about how it will develop, but again, we trust this process, and I really strongly believe that it will be important learning experience for students. So I will finish here and ask Katarina to talk more about, to continue this topic on Faculty of Philosophy as public space, but not only for students, but for wider community, and how do we tackle social and political issues at a faculty? What was going on before, and what is going on now?
Okay, thank you, Maja. I'll continue with another aspect of our presentation. So Maja explored and explained what do we do internally with the students in our teaching. And now I will move to more like, let's call it external part. What about community engagement? What do we do in the community and in the society as the university or as the faculty? So first, of course, there is always a question of what is the role of university. And there is a list of a few, let's say, traditional roles or roles that we know and do, like being a partner in education. It could be in the context of learning cities or any other. Be a lifelong learning center, which might include alma mater, but it could be also a separate type of actions. A university or a faculty is also a center of expertise for different areas and different fields. It could be also a place where policymakers could get advice if they do want based evidence and research evidence-based policy, which is not always the case, but still. So it's a center of expertise. At the same time, a university is a critical consciousness of the society, and it provides a kind of academic guidance for community and for the society. But of course, this is traditionally and increasingly, I would say, the dilemma that we have at our faculty. But that's what we share, I believe, with universities across Europe, but even broader. So somehow the dilemma or the gap between two roles or two types of the roles and ideals. And first one is I just want to remind you of the Humboldt and this idea of university that provides comprehensive knowledge, and this is for general learning, for cultural knowledge. So bringing together art and research of different kind, but also again belonging to this type of the ideal to enable students to become autonomous individuals and world citizens by developing their own reasoning powers. And of course, in an environment of academic freedom. And that's exactly what Maja described to you now. And of course, increasingly, we are more and more under the pressure of marketization tendencies, a kind of neoliberal pressure that ask university to serve the needs of the economy, the needs of employment, to think of employment of the students, to think of the needs of the labor market. So on one hand, we have the pressure that we are caught in this gap and looking for the role, but additionally, and that's specific for Serbia and a few other countries, maybe in Eastern Europe, that we have a kind of a political pressure and a political crisis. Of course, for our faculty, and now I will focus on the Faculty of Philosophy, this is not the first time. The famous 68, of course, it was different from Paris, London, and other places where the student protest took part, but there was also, they took also place also in Belgrade at our faculty, but especially in the 90s. And I just need to remind you of the war in former Yugoslavia, the time of Milosevic regime and so on. So even at that time, our faculty was the center of the political opposition. Some people even call it the recruitment center for political leaders, because many of them did come from the humanities, and our faculty has 10 departments, and each of them are, of course, from this field, from the humanities. So people called it also the island of academic freedom. And that was the place where we nurtured the critical theory, the critical thinking through different publications, lectures, working with the media as much as we could, because media was also controlled by the authoritarian government. And our faculty was also the starting point of, or the ending point of all civic protests, demonstrations, different performances, and there were plenty of them. For months and months, well, I should say for years, there were different kinds of student and civic protests. They would start or end at our place. So I'm talking about the place, and there is a good reason why I mentioned this. Some of you might recognize the photo, those of you who visited Belgrade. And you see this is the main plaza or the main square. On the right side is our faculty, left side is the university, the rectorate building, also including some rooms or some parts of some offices of our faculty also there. So this is the place the things are happening. It looks like a nice square, could be in any European city. But at the same time, okay, so this was the place, for example, of the performances, and it looks like a simple one, but I just want to illustrate when the students were depicting Serbia as the state in prison or kidnapped by the authoritarian governments. So it was the performance like there is the world around us, and we are caught in this state and kept by our government. And at that time, there was also sanctions of international community. So it was a double prison, to put it like this. So this square was a place or stage for different performances, for lectures, for the protest. And well, after 2016, we had to start again. We got after the time of political changes, positive political changes, and the progress was made. We were again caught up in with the authoritarian government, and it's getting worse. Now there are no so many reports because luckily there is no war, so we do not have media attention. But if you read closely and pay attention to some of the pages in your newspapers, you will see that again there are protests and protests against government in Serbia. And again, it starts and ends up at the square in front of our faculty. So talking about space, Maja mentioned public pedagogy. It's very interesting. There are already some analysis that this is space, not just a physical space, and the building is not just a building. They have a kind of a symbolic value. All those previous activities, but also this kind of critical thought that comes out of this space and the people that work there are bringing, it gives this place some symbolic value. So this simple square that I showed you, and then some of you know, this space per se sends a critical message, open-minded and critical message. So some people call it even the geography of resistance. And you can really map in the city of Belgrade, the spaces that we could put on the map of geography of resistance, and this square in front of our faculty is one of them. So looking from the lens of the theory a little bit, this is a new learning site, but this is also learning content, and this is also a new method of learning. And Maja introduced already you to this, so I won't repeat any of this. So this is now not for the students, but for the citizens who gather there. This is an act of active civic learning, or the living democracy. And of course, the role of university is to give the place, the frame, and the power to this community engagement, and to give it academic lead or university lead as much as it's possible or wished. So it's very interesting to observe, you know, this how a simple square could become a nightmare of a government. If you, this square, the name of this square is Plato, and of course it's not by accident. So the name of this square is Plato, and if you mentioned us, okay, there are some gatherings on the square Plato in front of the Faculty of Philosophy, that's a nightmare for our government. So it's such a symbolic power this place have. And this is a civic gathering, and they say this was one of these messages people were carrying. Faculty of Philosophy belongs to us. Even not faculty was mentioned, just philosophy, it belongs to us. It shows the role that faculty has in the civic, in the community and among the citizens in Belgrade. In the chat, there were some questions about what we did during the COVID-19 crisis, and I inserted very, very fast a few photos. The first reaction from our government was this one: oh, we are in the war. And of course, there was a typical machistic answer. I believe the very similar was the one that Trump gave in USA. You know, there is an enemy and we show that we are the best one and we will show our power. So that's how governments were trying to beat the virus, you know, by lockdowns, by preventing people to go out. And when people reacted like this, for example, you can see that if you look closer again, this is our square. People are all wearing masks, but it was a protest again, cutting and violating human rights during the crisis. So what we did is making people aware of the freedom and human rights during the pandemic. Because, you know, many governments, including ours, they use or misuse the pandemic in order to, you know, the violent human rights and to increase the power of authoritarian regime. So our role was to show that it's not possible, at least it shouldn't be possible, and to explain that there are some human rights that cannot be violating under any circumstances. And this is the protest against that. And of course, the reaction was very soon there. It was June this year. So when police attacked some of the protesters. So this was, again, you see people are wearing the mask and they were sitting like it's a peaceful protest. They're wearing the mask, they're sitting down. And this message here is, I don't want violence, I want my human rights. Of course, we used a lot of digital activism to inform people. And of course, there were many people from the Faculty of Law, many colleagues who were cooperating and who were sharing with us about our constitutional rights, because many of us were not really aware of the fact, what can we do in this extraordinary situation? What are we allowed to do? When are we allowed to go out, and what are we allowed to do or not? So how should we behave in order not to end up in prison and still to practice our civic rights? So again, you see there are masks and there is a social distance, but people gathered in order to react to these actions and measures imposed by the government that were estimated as not necessary and going too far and limited too much of the human rights. So the other thing that we were doing, not only, of course, not during the COVID, but before that, so with this authoritarian government we are having, it's organizing public debates. And there is a motto that we adopted. It's not philosophical to keep silent. So we are speaking loud, and this is the title of series of debates, public debates that we organized at our faculty. So it's belongs in the amphitheater that belongs to the faculty, of course, but it was open and it became a public space, similarly as Maja explained to you. So like public space, making the whole faculty as a public space, but especially space for gathering, for discussion, exchange, debate, sending openly critical messages about what's going on in the society. So this is the debate about education. So what's going on with the education, and very critical, especially about the Ministry of Education. So those debates were open to the public. So we would publish in all social media and we would announce it. It was open to the public and people were invited. So our amphitheater became a public space, or a civic space, to put it like this. And people who were participating in the debates and giving input were not only professors from our faculty, but also colleagues from other faculties, but also people, well, open-minded people and critical thinkers from different areas, also journalists and some political activists and so on. And the topics were very different, not only the topics that we cover in our study at our faculty, but also from economy, from the different scientific fields, media, environmental issues became very, very important because this government, what they are doing is really ecocide. So about the corruption, education, about the role of satire in raising civic awareness of the population, about the ethics, about democracy, and they could still be seen on a YouTube. And we always recommend people to watch them. We also use it for working with students. So that's the amphitheater that became a public space. Some of those people are our colleagues or students. Many of them are simply people who joined us for these public debates. Another thing we did, we opened also some of the spaces of our faculty. Again, those colleagues who joined us last year for the ESRIA conference, they will recognize the first floor where we had some of our sessions during the conference. So we offered this space for different kind of exhibitions. Of course, each of them very important from the point of view of civic education, very important for a strong political messages. So this is a political caricatures. So each of them, this is one of the journals, which is open-minded and critical. So usually they have this kind of cartoons and caricatures about the government, or some of the critical arts. So here the message is, it's not philosophers are not silent, so the artists are not silent. So we open the space for the artists, also for the critical art. Then for the political comics, just yesterday, no, today, 26, today there is an opening of a kind of a political comics. Milan Dog is an artist who is using the already existing comics, but he inserts the content from the Serbian everyday's life and politics and politicians and so on. So critical messages. So it's opening today at the premises of our faculty. And now on the end, so we are now currently, of course, with all the activism you can imagine that we are not very much liked by our government, and there is always a kind of a silent war. So silent war is not very silent. We were, especially during the COVID time, we were signing many petitions, also organized many actions, some of them digital, of course, and some of them combined, as I showed. And now it's just a few days ago, we are in a war about a hole. Now you may wonder why a hole? Well, you see, again, we are at the same square in front of the Faculty of Philosophy. The square, we are using it because it's, of course, in front of our building, but it does not belong to us. It belongs to the city. And purely administrative, the city government, so the local government is in charge of taking care of it and repairing. And they never want to repair it, and we are not allowed to do so. But recently, we were publicly accused, professors of the Faculty of Philosophy, that we are only criticizing the government, but we don't want to repair the square in front of our building. Of course, it was a lie because we are not allowed to do so, but they used that also, and that was a message, to the people, like, look, these professors and researchers from the Faculty of Philosophy, they're capable of criticizing the government, but they're not capable of, do some small reparations. So the suggestion was that we should leave the lessons and teaching, and do some physical work, finally, do something useful. If it reminds you of some bad periods of the history, like, oh, those intellectuals, they should do some physical work, then you are really right. So our answer to these actions was published a few days ago. So we opened this an open invitation for the candidates. The best hole in the Belgrade is because our city government is awful. So they are always doing some reconstructions, like they call it reconstruction. As a matter of fact, the city is ruined, really ruined. Of course, behind that, there is investors-driven architecture and renovations, and a lot of money was really stolen. There is a lot of corruption, so you can see the holes around the city, everywhere across the city. So the Faculty of Philosophy and our group, so it's not philosophically to remain silent, we opened the invitation to the citizens to choose the best hole made by city government in Belgrade, and there will be some awards and some actions around that. So I hope we will have a chance to report you about the end of this war. But again, just an example of the civic actions and actions with the citizens that university is doing, and an illustration of how we see our role within the community on a level of city, but also on a level of government. So this is together academic citizenship and community engagement together. It's about socially engaged scholars, and that's what we think our ideal is. It's about academic interpretation of the social problems and economic problems, and of course, political problems. It's about providing guidance to the community, academic guidance to the community and to the society. And I cannot end up without mentioning the learning cities, but not in a very traditional way, not very much in a UNESCO understanding of it, but still I would put it in a broader sense. So we are talking about learning cities and smart cities, but there are more and more rebel cities. But if you mean rebel in a political sense, I would take it in a broader sense, like David Harvey called it, rebel city. They offer a battleground for the future of the humanity. So if university is not working on the future of humanity, who else? So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your questions and comments.
Thank you, indeed. I think it was very much interesting, and there is a comment from Fergal right now, yes, Katarina, the right to the city. I think it is there. I think a learning city is not just a city of infrastructure and people having to obey to rules and regulation. All in all, I think it is something that you have a living organism, what we may consider as a learning city, to prepare and stand for change and to include people to make things to be formulated bottom up as much as possible. So the floor is open to questions and comments. of participants, to each and all of you. There were quite a number of comments around while we were discussing. There was a short question from Ellen. How hard is it to secure a sense of collective voice when people are not together other than online? It was maybe a question and comment to Maja and Katarina.
Mm. Well, absolutely. I was talking about the space, you know, and geography of resistance. It is very difficult. And of course, we are trying to combine the actions, to use digital tools and to organize some digital actions and actions in the social media space. But we deeply believe that some kind of really physical actions, being there, being part of the space, feeling in the space is something that is very much needed. Therefore, we are very careful and we warn all the time, all those who are praising digital learning and, you know, this mantra like, oh, we can do everything digital, lovely, we have the solution to all the problems. No, we do not have. And moving everything to the digital, of course, now it's COVID and it's necessary, but there is really a danger of cutting a lot of possibilities and potential of a civic engagement and civic protest if it's needed. Yeah. And Pat is asking if you received any pressure. Absolutely. People are losing their jobs, they are being harassed, they are being attacked, absolutely, increasingly. I mean, at the beginning, it was very peaceful, now increasingly it's violent. There are more and more threats to the individuals, to the professors, researchers, students, activists, and so on. But still, they don't give up.
The trend is something similar in Budapest. I just don't know whether you have heard the news that there's an ongoing strike from students and professors of the University of Theatrical Studies, those people who learn to become actors and actresses and movie directors. They have a strong campaign on the Hungarian government trying to reduce management and financing into a formal foundation, but still to put their own people into the foundation management. So this is calling for a kind of campaign, anti-government campaign, to leave universities to stay autonomous. And I think autonomy is another very important matter when we talk about this civic education, how to keep a group of people as intellectuals to stay autonomous and fight for autonomy.
There are two questions, and I believe Maja can answer. Maybe I start with the one because it's related to the previous, and Maja can continue. So Fergal mentioned the movements and community-based groups. There is a lot of cooperation. It took us some time to realize that, but there are also very good examples in neighboring country, in Croatia, in Montenegro, about linking these community-based groups. Usually it starts with the environmental groups, but then it goes further. We have a very, very good cooperation, and many of those actions added together. You know, you start with the local problems, being environment or this investors-driven urbanism or things like this. They start, we join, or we start and they join. We offer them space for a public debate or media, and they organize the actions on the spot and so on. Yes, and it seemed to be a very good recipe. Recently in Montenegro, they succeeded also with a lot of support from these small community-based groups. In Croatia, they even entered the parliament, those small community-based groups. So it seems to be one of really good lessons learned from all those activities. And thanks, Christina. Yes, yes, support is very much needed. Yes, thank you. Maja, question to you.
Yeah, thank you for the first question was about how to really create space for people to be together in this digital world we are living it. And what I feel, what I see was going on is that basically we can, body in space is important, and physical interventions are important. What do? We combine online discussions with physical interventions. And I think people, when we share collective problem, when we share collective idea, and when we do the same thing, maybe we do not share the same time and space, But when we use an idea and build with this together and allow different voices and allow negotiation and the trust that something will happen, I think this keep this this collective spirit. And I will also agree with Christina. It is important not to stay at the level of mapping problem and emphasizing what's wrong with the environment and society, but really create an intervention. And that is really specific for our field, for adult education, really to create something new and to build on that and to influence, to create something what we consider to be positive. Yeah. And there is, I see another question from Fergal, and I'm really thankful for this question, because this also troubles me, is how to document these experiences. As I see, one of the, let's say, hidden agenda of this class is to disturb the common ideas about adult education. As a student, when they finish when they graduate, they will create learning experience for adults. And what they really, yes, the role of learner has been changed. And I see this in their reflections. And I have to say, while I was preparing this presentation, I was going through their reflection, asking myself why we actually do not do some research on this question, how the role of the learner actually changed, and how did it happen? A kind of transformative learning that took place with throughout these activities. And what I see what I witnessed is that at the beginning they wanted structure. They were afraid of doing something unfamiliar, but then through the time they see our role of learner as a creator and a learner at the same time. So there is no this duality between, okay, this is the world, we are creating this world, and then after we are learning about this world. But they see that they are creating and learning at the same time, and that they have agency to do that. And I strongly believe, I'm enthusiastic and optimistic about that this will influence their further work in adult education.
Thank you. This question was not from Fergal, basically. Originally it was from Timo, but thank you very much for the comment. Indeed, Timo is going through another comment that it would be great to collect data on this issue of transformative learning with you while doing an intervention, learning becoming an agent. So I think this is very much interesting to develop.
Yeah, just to mention that Maja and I, we are also teaching transformative learning at our university. Both courses, active citizenship and transformative learning, it's for the master. Transformative learning is for the master level. They are always full of students. They always choose, and we are always like, oh, why they're all coming to us? It's much more work for us, and so on. But it's a great experience. And we did write a few articles, Balázs, I believe you're aware of that. So, you know, these learning cities, not so much university, but still about space and gathering and power of community engagements and so on. And we would like to share, we can send it to UCAN and you can share it further, those several articles. But you also inspired us now maybe to transform some of those things that we do with the students and with the community to another kind of article, because what we did in continuous active research.
Yeah, I think it is important, just what Katarina mentioned. I think UCAN is a platform. What we can offer for such concern is to get the discourse to be spread, and I think that's the role for higher education institutions, to make open discussion and exchange of ideas to happen. And I think this is something very much important, that as a community of universities, we can share some common values that can be signaled in a communication. But we have to discuss it with our leadership, and indeed, I think we need common understanding from our members. But I think this is something very much important, what's going on. Like Carmen is saying, I think if you provide the paper, we publish it and disseminate it to make our members to be concerned about this movement. I think that's very much important. So thank you very much indeed for your input, and thank you very much for the comments of colleagues who've participated in this today's activity and the presentation. Thank you, Maja, and thank you, Katarina, for the critical insights to your work, what you've been doing together with your students, but also how you work together with your community and those organizations and institutions who want to work for an open and democratic community in Belgrade and around. Also, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed, and may I thank you for all the participants who've come together. Let's continue tomorrow. If I may ask Carmen to show today's event, if possible, the slide for tomorrow. What we think is very much important to come together for a panel discussion. And let me just highlight that there will be some other colleagues to join us from distinguished organizations. Fergal Finnegan to represent Esria, Brikena Chomaki from the Lifelong Learning Platform, and also all these distinguished colleagues who've made their input so far during this week. So let's gather tomorrow at 12 and continue discussion regarding rethinking lifelong learning in the scope of active and global citizenship. Thank you for now. I wish you every good. Let's keep the discussion continued. I wish you every good for now, and take care. Thank you. Bye-bye for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Thank you all.
Thank you, Pat,
bye-bye.
indeed. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.